Hey everybody, welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today we'll be watching how the Ottomans became Sultans of Rum, Rise of the Ottoman Empire Part 6 by Kings and Generals. Now last time we saw the consequential Battle of Kosovo and the continued Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. Now this time we'll see if the Ottomans can continue to cement their power in the region and perhaps expand even further. Now, if you guys end up enjoying this one, I'd appreciate it if you would leave a like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon, which is linked down below, and will give you access to exclusive reactions. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into this video.
Although the Ottomans had managed to force the vassalization of Moravian Serbia during the aftermath of the Battle of Kosovo, casualties in that battle had been massive, and as a result, a power vacuum had arisen in the Balkans. With its armies in southeastern Europe severely depleted, and its former sultan slain on the battlefield, the Ottoman Empire, under its new sultan, Bayezid I, was in a state of uncertainty and more vulnerable to outside invasions from its hostile neighbors in the Balkans and Anatolia than in any previous period in the country's history.
Yeah, we saw big casualties on both sides. Now, of course, the Serbs are in a much worse position than the Ottomans, right? They definitely took more of a hit, and in the long run, this won't stop Ottoman expansion. But in the moment, the Ottomans are in a vulnerable position. They've taken a lot of casualties. Their sultan has been killed on the field of battle. That could leave them open to challenges from rival powers, all around their empire. Not just in the Balkans, but of course back in Anatolia, right? I mean, this happens when you lose, or even, something goes a little wrong for you as an empire. You're stretched pretty thin. Your rivals everywhere will hear about it and try to take advantage of it. And as a big and, still growing empire, the Ottomans, they have enemies, a lot of enemies, on all sides.
Although the situation in the Balkans was slowly settling down after the climax in hostilities in Kosovo, elsewhere, the steady peace that Edirne had crafted between the various Turkic beyliks of Anatolia was slowly falling apart. In this episode on the history of the Ottoman Empire, we will cover Sultan Bayezid's conquest of Asia Minor and the rising tensions with the Christian powers of Europe which flared up in its wake. Throughout this series, we'll be mentioning Janissaries, who were elite troops of the Ottoman Empire, so we wanted to highlight a way to learn more about the lives of these picked men through our sponsor Magellan TV, the documentary streaming service that include...
And you guys know the deal. I've got Kings and Generals video linked down below, so go check that out, give them a like, subscribe to their channel, check out their sponsor, basically show them support for making these fantastic videos, and I'm gonna let their ad play through, since of course we're all enjoying their content together. We want to show support and appreciation, right?
Of the common soldier, and indeed they came to be feared in battle, because the system certainly got results. To find out how all this worked, and see what made the Janissaries so fearsome, check out the Ancient Warriors series, episode 8 on Magellan TV. Obviously, there's a whole load of other stuff on Magellan TV, and it's the best place to find history documentaries on endless topics, all ad-free, with more being continually added and 4K options included at no extra cost. All of this, including Ancient Warriors, is included in the 1-month free trial available via our link in the description, so check it out. During the reign of Murad I, the Ottoman state underwent a major transformation within its military and bureaucratic ranks, as the Timar and Divshirme systems were institutionalized throughout the Sultanate's Balkan territories. With the centralizing Ottoman state relying more on its newly established Balkan political class for...
And as I say, the Timar system is essentially the Ottoman version of feudalism, right? You have your class of what in Western feudalism would be known as knights, your vassals, right? They own land granted to them by the king or the sultan. They are these powerful soldiers who also bring their own peasants or serfs or whatever along with them. The people who tend the lands that they either own or have been temporarily granted by, in this case, the Sultan, right? So it's essentially a style of feudalism similar to what we see in a lot of other countries during this time period. And of course, we've talked about the devshirme system, the system of slavery, where they take non-Muslim children and train them either to be bureaucrats or soldiers. The janissaries, what they were talking about in that advertisement right there.
Governance and war, the independently minded Turkic Ghazi warbands of old, who were present...
Basically, these are central institutions to running the empire, right? The devshirme system is central to both military and the state apparatus, and the timar system is also essential to both of those things. You can see how there's sort of both ways to run the state and military, one a little more centralized, right? You're training your own bureaucrats and soldiers to sort of serve the central government, and another, the timar system, the feudalism, a little more decentralized, right? You're ruling through your vassals. You're a big empire, you need different ways of ruling. You're going to need a centralized command structure, centralized government, but you also need a sort of more decentralized form of government if you're going to rule over all this territory. So, essentially these are the institutions of the Ottoman Empire.
Since the days of Osman Gazi, began slowly losing political influence in Edirne. Many Turkic groups in Anatolia felt that the Ottoman Sultanate had become too sympathetic to the Christian elements of its Balkan holdings, and too hostile to the Islamic Ghazi traditions of old.
If we take a look at the map, and of course the Ottoman Empire is going to expand in both directions, though if we think about the fullest extent of the Ottoman Empire, they've got, it's definitely some expansion left in sort of the Christian world, you could call it, in the Balkans, essentially. They've got a lot more territory to take. But if you think about how much more they're going to expand in the Muslim world, they have got tons of expansion left. So at this point, the empire kind of is weighted towards that Christian element. They've got a lot of Christian subjects. A lot of their territory is in Europe, and they're ruling over a lot of these Christian subjects of these former, European states, whether it be Serbia, Bulgaria, the Byzantine Empire. Though even the Ottoman Empire at its fullest extent, of course it is a Muslim empire. It is at this moment. It always will be. But, there is an allowance for different religious, especially, I was going to say religious and ethnic groups, but particularly religious groups, particularly the Abrahamic religions. There's some allowance for them to rule themselves. So, the Ottoman Empire works in a particular way. But you could understand that some of these Muslim Turkic subjects are beginning to say, hey, wait a minute, you've turned a lot of your attention to the West. You're focusing a lot on Europe, on these new Christian subjects. We feel like we're sort of being forgotten about, out here back in Anatolia. Hey, this is where you came from. Turn your attention back. And this is a pretty typical thing to happen to any empire, right? As you expand, you take in new interest groups, new subjects, and oftentimes your prior subjects, your prior interest groups that already existed, aren't so happy about that.
Holdings, and too hostile to the Islamic Ghazi traditions of old. In addition to the fratricide of the popular Shehzada Yaqub and the decline in the Ottomans' ability to project power in Anatolia after their massive losses at Kosovo, the Ghazi warbands within the Sultanate and the other various Turkic beyliks of Western Anatolia began to become increasingly antsy in their desire to throw off Ottoman overlordship. Seeking to take advantage of the region's political unrest and Murad I's sudden death, during the spring of 1390, the ruler of the powerful Karamanid state, Alaeddin Ali Bey, would conduct a surprise invasion into Ottoman territories. He would be accompanied by the many smaller Turkic beyliks of Western Anatolia, whose allegiance regularly flip-flopped between the Ottomans and Karamanids, seeking to play the two major powers of the region off one another in order to maintain their independence. In a short period of time, the newly formed Turkic coalition would capture the Ottoman buffer towns of Akşehir and Beyşehir, in addition to Kütahya, thus sparking panic in Edirne. The new Sultan of the Ottomans did not stay idle as his domains in Anatolia were being chipped away. First obtaining a fatwa in order to officially declare wars against fellow Muslim states, Bayezid, along with an Ottoman army made out of mostly European vassal troops and his own household troops, would cross into Anatolia with the intent of waging a lightning-fast war in the region.
It's interesting to see that he needed to get a fatwa in order to make war against fellow Muslims. You know, it's funny because obviously war is war, politics is politics. I mean, you know me, religion, I believe, never gets in the way of a good war. You know, whether you have Christians fighting Christians or Muslims fighting Muslims, you know, the religion doesn't stop them. In fact, sometimes it inflames the tension. But there is sort of the added step sometimes of when you're fighting your brother under the same religion. They sometimes have to get some sort of justification. You see this in the Christian world as well sometimes. It's like, how do we justify fighting other Christians? It's funny to see that here. They're like, all right, we need some justification here.
The Ottoman Sultan would also be accompanied by his vassal lords, the newly crowned Serbian royal Stefan Lazarevic, and the junior Byzantine co-emperors John VII and Manuel II.
I mean, Bayezid is just, you know, flexing his power here. He's saying, all right, I need to take care of this affair back in Anatolia. I'm bringing the damn Byzantine emperor with me. Yeah, just evidence that the Ottomans are saying, yeah, sure, you guys, these are all our rival Turkic powers here in Anatolia, but remember, us, the Ottomans, we've got a whole lot more going on than all of y'all put together. Even if we're a little vulnerable at the moment.
A single military campaign during the summer and fall of 1390, Bayezid and his armies would conquer the Yamianid, Aydinid, Metanesha and Samarkand beyliks in quick succession, absorbing their significant wealth in the process. Moreover, the isolated Byzantine town of Philadelphia, the last imperial town left in Anatolia, was finally transferred to Ottoman rule after a short siege.
The fall of Philadelphia. No! As I mentioned before, I'm from Philadelphia in the United States, so I got a rep for my town's namesake.
Entering in Ankara and resupplying his army, Bayezid resumed his Anatolian campaign the following spring, which resulted in the fall of the Hamindid and Tekke beyliks, in addition to the reconquest of the towns of Akşehir and Beyşehir from the Karamanids. After capturing large swaths of Anatolia within a short period, mainly due to the exploits of Stefan Lazarevic and his Serbian shock cavalry, Bayezid now had a large source of manpower to...
Well, and here's the thing. When you're an empire, at least a powerful and capable empire, you know, you may have your resources stretched thin, and that may make you vulnerable at times, but you should be able to marshal resources, and when you marshal resources and manpower, you know, you have no equal, right? Here's the thing with the Ottomans. Sure, you may be able to attack them, take some of their territory, but once the Sultan's able to get himself back to Anatolia, you're screwed. When that's no longer the case, that's how you know an empire is in trouble, right? Look at the Byzantines. The Byzantines reached a point when not only were they constantly stretched thin, like they had their men and resources spread across an entire empire, but they weren't even able to mobilize manpower to focus on one area in particular. You know, they were just too weak, and that's when you knew the Byzantine Empire, it was in real decline. But the Ottomans, as a young, powerful empire, they're still at that point where they can turn their attention to one problem, if they want to, and they can solve it.
All on for future military campaigns into Europe. Seeing that his Turkic coalition in western Anatolia had fallen so quickly to Bayezid, Alaeddin Ali Bey scrambled to find new allies, entering into an alliance with the Jandarid Beylik and the former lands of the Eretnid Beylik, which was now ruled by an Islamic scholar turned sultan called Qadi Burhanuddin. However, this new alliance would prove futile, as Ottoman forces would catch the Karamanid Bey by surprise, swiftly storming into his capital of Konya and capturing the city without bloodshed. Despite his decisive and crushing victories, Sultan Bayezid did not want to further antagonize the Turkoman nobles of the region with his war of conquest. To that end, he concluded a relatively lenient peace treaty with Aladin Ali Bey, in which the Karamanid ruler would submit to Ottoman vassalage.
Well, I don't know exactly what's going through Bayezid's head, but one thing might be, and we've seen him doing this in his western territories as well, back in the Balkans. If you intend to rule over all this territory one day, a lot of these people you're fighting, the leaders of these towns or these different polities, they're going to be your vassals at some point. Or if not your vassal, maybe they're serving as, leaders of some sort within your empire. Whatever it is, you may need them to serve under you. And so you have some interest in not alienating them too much. Sure, you're fighting a war against them, but you might still want to be somewhat lenient so that when you bring them under your boot, they're willing to go relatively easily, as long as you coerce them and give them the right push, the carrot and the stick, the right reward, the right punishment. They might be willing to pretty easily come under Ottoman rule and rule on your behalf, right?
And his territories reduced to the lands east of the stream of Chashamba. It was also during this period in which Bayezid, in an attempt to legalize his claim over all of Anatolia, would brandish himself as the Sultan of Rum, a title that was once held by the former Seljuk sultans of old. With the Karamanids once again submitting to Ottoman supremacy in Anatolia, Bayezid now turned his attention up north to the Jandarid Beylik. In yet another lightning-fast military campaign during the summer of 1391, Ottoman forces captured the Jandarid capital of Kastamonu and annexed the Beylik into the empire. After plundering the former Jandarid countryside for some time, Bayezid now turned his gaze to the domains of Kadi Bahanidin. After swiftly capturing the border towns of Amisya and Chorum during the fall of the same year, Bayezid seemed poised to complete his total conquest of Anatolia. However, after a sudden counter-offensive led by Bahanidin himself, culminating in the Battle of Kirktalim and the death of Bayezid's son, Shehzada Ertugrul, Ottoman forces withdrew back into Jandarid lands in defeat.
Damn, rare Ottoman L.
As Bayezid was making final preparations to once again invade the domains of Kadi Bahanidin the following spring, major news from Europe had begun trickling into the Sultan's tent. With the majority of Ottoman armies preoccupied in Anatolia.
Right, so once again, the Ottomans are focused in one area. What happens? You're going to see problems pop up somewhere else. I know I keep repeating myself, but that is, one of the eternal truths of running, kind of running anything, but especially running a big empire.
King Sigismund of Hungary and the Serbian nobleman Vuk Brankovic had begun plundering the domains of Serbian ruler Stefan Lazarevic in an attempt to push back Ottoman presence in the Balkans. Meanwhile, Voivode Mircea of Wallachia had also begun a series of military operations in the region by raiding deep into Ottoman Bulgaria and conquering the vital Ottoman Danube fortress town of Silistra. The Wallachian voivode had also conquered the northern half of the Despotate of Dobruja, thus gaining access to a number of lucrative Black Sea ports in the process. In addition to these Christian incursions into the Balkans, relations between Edirne and Constantinople were becoming increasingly strained. I
do love to see all these different states or polities that would later just become regions or parts of different countries, like Wallachia or Dobruja, all these different places that, once upon a time were these medieval kingdoms are just parts of, Romania or Bulgaria or, any of these different Balkan states.
Power struggle between the various factions of the Palaiologos dynasty erupted in the Byzantine capital city.
Of course. Infighting. If there's no infighting, it's not truly the Byzantine Empire. Infighting is probably the thing they're best at, apart from surviving for a really long time. Those are the two things I think the Romans have Well, they've got a lot, but over the span of the entire empire, I would give them most survivability, which I think is based around adaptability, and 2, infighting, civil conflict, civil war.
Since the end of the previous Palaiologos civil war in 1379, the Byzantine realm was held together by an uneasy peace between the political faction of Andronikos IV and his son and co-emperor John VII, who predominantly ruled from Salimbria, and the faction...
But hey, you guys know, as this, the year in the corner ticks up, we're getting closer and closer to the fall of Constantinople. We've still got a bit to go, but we're drawing closer.
John V and his sons co-emperor Manuel II and despot Theodori I, who predominantly ruled from Constantinople and Morea. Ever since the political settlement of 1381, the mainline Byzantine succession from Constantinople was determined to be passed through John V to his eldest son Andronikos IV, and then to his son John VII, thus bypassing Manuel II's claim to the throne. However, with the untimely death of Andronikos IV in 1385, the political settlement of 1381 was brought into question, as the 15-year-old John VII was now alone in his bid for the Byzantine throne. Distrustful of his grandfather and uncle, John VII would travel to Genoa in 1389 to solicit support for his claim to the Byzantine throne. But it would be the ascension of Bayezid I the same year which would give the young Byzantine emperor an opportunity to seize Constantinople.
Alright.
During the spring of 1390, Bayezid, who distrusted both John V and Manuel II for their open defiance against Ottoman suzerainty, would lend troops to John VII. The Ottoman Sultan thought, by supporting the most junior claimant to the Byzantine throne, that he could gain a more trustworthy and dependent ally in Constantinople. Everything went as planned for Bayezid, as John the Younger would swiftly seize Constantinople.
I will say, you can see how much of a big deal the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire once was, by how Bayezid is dealing with this. You know, if this was any other state, you know you would have just taken this territory already. But because it's Constantinople, and because it's the Byzantines, whether out of some sort of respect or some sort of concern, fear about, you know, what might happen if he tries to take it, I mean, the sort of broad response globally, or maybe, I don't see, this is very late Byzantine history. You know, Constantinople had been stormed by crusaders, so I don't know how Constantinople's defenses were holding up at this point. I don't know if that would present a challenge at all, but I think it's probably more symbolic that Bayezid has still not decided to just march in there straight up and take it over. It shows you the status that the Byzantines once had. They don't really have that status anymore, but it's sort of a shadow, an echo of what once was.
But after only 4 months of rule, Venetian forces under Manuel II would retake.
Oh, the Venetians. Dude, I'm telling you, you look at those last couple hundred years of Byzantine history, and them Italians, which is funny because they were all once part of the same empire. But those Italians, they were doing a lot of meddling, you know, from those growing and newly prosperous Italian city-states. The Venetians are a good example.
The imperial city, re-establishing the status quo. After seeing that his plans for the Romans had been thwarted, a furious Bayezid would demand both Manuel II and John V join his Ottoman host for his upcoming Anatolian campaign, along with a minor Byzantine retinue of cavalry. During the subsequent Ottoman military campaign from 1390 to 1391, the two co-Byzantine emperors would serve as de facto political hostages to the Ottoman Sultan. While Ottoman armies were preoccupied with Anatolia, Emperor John V saw a good opportunity to shore up his defences at home, and ordered the strengthening of Constantinople's fortifications, particularly the city's Golden Gate complex. After hearing of this news from the Byzantine capital, an enraged Bayezid I would threaten John V with the blinding of his son, Manuel II, if he did not cease the construction project at once.
I'm sure Bayezid's pretty annoyed at this point. He's like, yo, I am not yet storming your capital and taking over the last of your territory. I'm restraining myself for whatever reason, right? There might have been a couple of reasons, but these damn Byzantine emperors and co-emperors and claimants can't stop meddling and trying to do things under his nose. Bayezid's like, I see what's going on. You are never gonna get something past me. So just stop, why don't you? And they don't stop.
The reluctant 58-year-old would submit to Bayezid's demands before proceeding to shut himself up in his palace in humiliation. In the first months of 1391, the ailing senior Byzantine emperor would die of natural causes after reigning over what was left of the Byzantine realm for more than 50 years. Upon hearing the news of his father's death, Manuel II would slip out of Ottoman captivity from Bursa and rush back to Constantinople before his nephew John VII could claim the imperial throne.
You know, at this point, and for a lot of Byzantine history, the emperorship is essentially an extended game of musical chairs. You've got a bunch of claimants circling around, and whoever can manage to snatch the crown quick enough will be able to take the throne, at least for a short while, until someone else comes by and jumps in the hot seat.
Hearing the news of Manuel's escape from his captivity and his coronation in Constantinople, and feeling robbed of the opportunity to pick a Roman monarch of his choosing, a now even angrier Bayezid put forth new demands upon the new Byzantine emperor. The Sultan of the Ottomans would demand for the construction of a Turkic quarter in Constantinople, in addition to a mosque and Islamic cadi to oversee the new settlement. Finishing off his humiliating list of demands for Manuel II, Bayezid would state to the Byzantine monarch, "If you do not accept my orders and do as I command, then shut the gates of your city and govern what lies behind them, for everything beyond the gates belongs to me." A powerless Manuel II would bow down to Bayezid's demands.
Bayezid's given out the threats now.
And 3 months later would be summoned to the Sultan's camp.
He's like, hey man, I'm trying to play politics with y'all, but if you don't want to play, remember, I control all this territory around you. So, you can try and defend yourself against me. See how that goes. We know how that goes, but of course that hasn't happened yet.
The former lands of the Jandarid Beylik to swear loyalty to his new liege lord. Although Ottoman relations with Constantinople seemed stable for the moment, the same could not be said about the situation in the Balkans, as Serbian, Hungarian and Wallachian incursions in the region continued plunging deep into Ottoman territory. Putting his military campaign against Cadi Burhanuddin on pause, Bayezid, along with a recently replenished Ottoman army, would begin the march back to Europe in the last months of 1391. Meanwhile, in Edirne, Ottoman Grand Vizier Cendelizade Ali Pasha would coordinate limited retaliatory raiding operations into the lands of Wallachia, Hungary and Bosnia. However, by the turn of the year, Sultan Bayezid I and his main Ottoman host would enter into Europe after a lightning-fast forced march, catching the Christian powers of the region off guard.
Whoa.
The Ottoman Sultan would begin his European military campaign by first marching on the domains of Vuk Brankovic, the last Serbian nobleman that had yet to submit to Ottoman vassalage. Retracing his father's march during the Kosovo campaign of 3 years past, would swiftly capture the major Serbian town of Skopje, forcing Brankovic to submit to Ottoman suzerainty. With all of Serbia now under his rule, Bayezid then turned his attention to Mircea of Wallachia. In a blistering campaign, Ottoman forces would reconquer Silistra from the Voivode, in addition to the southern half of the Despotate of Dobruja. In addition to these conquests...
I do think it is more Dobruja than Dobruja, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not native to the region.
Bayezid would spend the rest of the year ramping up Ottoman raids into Hungary and Bosnia. After years of fending off numerous Ottoman invasions into his realm, The Bulgarian Empire under Tsar Ivan Shishman had been reduced to a small collection.
Yeah, bro, the Bulgars have been struggling, man. There's not much of it left. They were soundly beaten. And like I said, this was not the height of Bulgaria, even before the Ottomans entered onto the scene, right? It was sort of the ascendancy of Serbia, medieval Serbia. But even then, the Bulgarians are in a real tough position now, where their state is becoming less and less of a state. I mean, they're a vassal state, and they're coming close to ceasing not to exist.
Of lands surrounding the Danube fortress town of Nicopolis and the main capital of Tarnovo. Seeking to finally finish off the Bulgarians before they could enter into a potential alliance with Hungary and Wallachia, Bayezid would invade the Tsar's domain during the spring of 1393. Upon hearing the news of invasion, Ivan would abandon his capital at Tarnovo and retreat to the more formidable Nicopolis, the fortress town that Murad I had unsuccessfully besieged back in 1388. This time, the Sultan's eldest son, Suleiman Çelebi, led the Ottoman host. With Tarnovo left leaderless and Ottoman forces now converging on the city, the capital's defences would be left in the leadership of the Patriarch of Bulgaria, Euthymius of Tarnovo. Ultimately, the city could not hold. After 3 months of withstanding the Ottoman siege, the exhausted defenders of Tarnovo would surrender to Suleiman Çelebi, resulting in a mass migration of Turkic settlers into the former Bulgarian capital. With the Bulgarian realm now being reduced to Nicopolis, Ottoman armies would now march on the neighboring Tsardom of Vidin.
See, this is one of those things where your country is being attacked, right? And sometimes you'll see a government will flee from the capital to a more well-defended city to, bide their time until they can fight back, maybe get some better positioning. This is one of those moments where there's not really much that can be done, right? Because the Bulgarian government, or at least the leader, has retreated back into Nicopolis, but you don't really have time to bide. You don't really have more territory to back up into. You're kind of backed into a corner at this point.
Ruled by Ivan Shishman's half-brother, Ivan Stratsimir. Before sharing the same fate as his fellow Bulgarian monarch, Stratsimir would submit to Ottoman vassalage, even accepting an Ottoman garrison to be stationed in his capital of Vidin. With large swaths of the Balkans now under Ottoman rule, during the winter of 1393, Sultan Bayezid I would call forth his Balkan vassals to meet with him in the town of Seres. Having serious doubts about the reliability of his Christian subjects' allegiances, the suspicious Ottoman Sultan wished to cement his authority over his vassals to ensure none were conspiring against him. Those who answered the call were Manuel II of the Byzantine Empire, Despot Theodori of Morea, John VII of Salimbria, Konstantin Dejanovich of Velbazhd, and lastly Stefan Lazarevich of Moravian Serbia. This call to meet spooked many, as it was rumoured that Bayezid would round up and murder all of his vassal lords in order to centralise his power in the Balkans, just like he had in Anatolia. This rumour would be false, and after a few days of exchanging pledges and
we've seen so far, right? The Ottoman Empire, to some extent they centralize power, and it's sort of out of necessity for an empire this size, it has to be somewhat decentralized. You need vassals. You need leaders who are already there to rule on your behalf. So the idea that, they'd kill all these leaders, centralize power, it doesn't make much practical sense. That's more ideological. And the Ottomans, they've been a pretty practical empire. And so they know they need some degree of cooperation from these, Christian Balkan political leaders. They need them to buy into the system, or at least agree to somewhat cooperate with the Ottoman system.
Promises to the Ottoman Sultan, all of the Christian lords participating in the meeting were free to go back to their own holdings. However, this Ottoman exercise of psychological warfare would be the breaking point for Manuel II, as upon his return to Constantinople, he would suspend his ties with Adana.
Yeah, well, if you're Manuel II, that meeting is a good chance to remember all the territory that your empire once governed now is being governed by the Ottomans, and you're just sort of another minor power player among the Balkan powers. Another vassal of the Ottomans, so maybe that stung a little bit. I don't know.
The Byzantine emperor hoped that the mighty Theodosian walls of his capital city would deter any future...
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know what had prevented the Ottomans from taking Constantinople so far. I don't know if it was like a real fear of the defenses, because the Theodosian walls, they were legendary, you know? I mean, Constantinople famously had been defended time and time again, in big part due to those Theodosian walls. No one wanted to take it on. But, I mean, Constantinople was quite degraded at this point. It's not the city it once was. So I don't know if there was a real security concern, you know, from the Ottomans, or if it was more a symbolic thing. But Manuel II at this point, he's putting stock in Constantinople's physical defenses.
Future attempt at an Ottoman siege. Upon hearing the news that his Roman vassal was playing hooky with him, Bayezid would begin raiding the outskirts of Constantinople before blockading the Byzantine capital altogether. In addition to directly waging war against Manuel II, Byzantine Thessaly would be quickly conquered by local Ottoman marcher lords, resulting in a territorial expansion which saw the Sultanate expand as far south as the Gulf of Corinth. In addition to the blockade of Constantinople, Bayezid would begin the building of a waterfront fortress on the narrowest point of the Bosporus in order to block maritime traffic from the Black Sea to the Byzantine capital.
I mean, look, however the defenses of Constantinople survive, it will take a major battle, a major siege to take it. I mean, that much everybody knows. Now, how difficult will it be? I don't quite know, and I don't know what they thought, but they would have known this is a big city, you know, it does have serious defenses. It's, I mean, historically been positioned very well to protect itself, so it's not going to be like a piece of cake. You're going to need to do a serious siege, but, you know, maybe it's possible to take it.
Construction of the Anadolu Hisarı, or Anatolian castle, and its fast completion in only a matter of months, would display the Ottoman Sultan's true desire to become the undisputed ruler of the Romans.
Yeah.
However, Bayezid's sudden blockade of one of Christendom's largest cities would have a rippling effect in Europe.
Okay, so, and this is the thing I was saying earlier, I didn't know if Bayezid was concerned about taking Constantinople because of the physical defenses, because maybe there was something symbolic there, like there was a bit of respect for what the Byzantines once were, or if he was concerned about the knock-on effects, right? Because Constantinople, I'll point this out again, though it was very degraded from what it once was, it had a reputation, it was world famous, it was this grand city. And so maybe Bayezid was worried that taking it would invoke, perhaps a sort of crusade against the Ottoman Empire from, saying all of Christendom, it's never all of Christendom, but from a sort of unified Christian force from across the Christian world, right? Maybe he was concerned about that. I could see that as being a very serious worry.
As a result of the siege, and Manuel II's pleas for European military assistance, King Sigismund of Hungary would call for an anti-Ottoman crusade.
Right.
Soon after, the popes in Rome and Avignon, who were in the middle of the Western Schism, would proclaim the...
God, we've got our own incredible thing going on over here with the two popes.
start of a crusade against Bayezid. As envoys and petitions were sent across Europe for the upcoming crusade, the Sultan of the Ottomans would not deter his choice of blockading the Byzantine capital city. Confident in his abilities as a military general, and coming off of a string of impressive victories in both the Balkans and Anatolia, Bayezid decided to double down and go on the offensive.
Alright.
In our next video on Ottoman history, a massive crusading army with knights from Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, Wallachia, France, Burgundy and Germany will bear down upon Ottoman lands. To make sure you do not miss it, alongside any other videos on Turkish history, Please subscribe and hit the bell button. And please consider
obviously it's not. It just looks a little bit like the American flag right there.
liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content.
Alrighty. Another good one. Another good one, guys. The continued expansion of the Ottoman Empire. I always find it fascinating. The next real touch point for me is that, takeover of Constantinople. But the thing is, there's a long way to go. There's decades to go until the fall of Constantinople. And I'm looking at the series here. We've got more than 10 videos until that fall of Constantinople, which was actually released pretty recently. I saw it in my subscription feed. So, if you didn't know the history from the setup here, you probably think that, Constantinople wasn't going to last for much longer under Byzantine rule. But no, it actually has a couple more decades under its belt, surprisingly enough. That was another good one. If you guys enjoyed that one, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon, which is linked down below. So with all of that, I hope you guys are all having a good day today, and I'll see you all again next time. Goodbye.